Hey, it's the big master control program everybody's been talking about.
Sit right there. Make yourself comfortable.
A programmer is digitized and enters the computer system under the thumb of the master control program, who is totally not a melody pop.
I don't get it.
Video game designer trying to reclaim the rights to his stolen work gets involved in a digital revolution in Tron, and again later on in Tron Legacy.
Well, it's called Tron.
Tron is a 1982 film from Steven Lisberger that's almost but not quite an animated movie, that's almost but not quite a computer-generated movie, that's almost but not quite a live-action film.
He's nosing around again.
Flynn?
A few years earlier, talented ENCOM programmer Kevin Flynn had his video game creation Space Paranoids stolen by Ed Dillinger, who had passed it off as his own work and for his troubles was rewarded with multiple promotions where he's now ENCOM's senior executive vice president. Meanwhile, Flynn doesn't make any money off the huge success of Space Paranoids, apart from the quarters that he collects in the cabinets of his arcade, which is the cleanest and least dank 80s arcade in history, without anybody smoking or drinking or cutting history class. It's such a nice arcade that even stuffy parents would visit it. In fact, here are two stuffy parents looking for their runaway kid. Flynn's attempts to hack into ENCOM's system is thwarted by the Master Control Program, or MCP, which has shut down all access. This raises the hackles of various employees, from engineer Alan Bradley to his girlfriend Laura and her boss Dr. Gibbs. Their digitizing project is basically a hyper-advanced multifunction scanner and printer that can scan anything, turn it into digital bits, and then reassemble it later. The scanning unit itself costs around $50, but the ink cartridges will run you $20 billion a pop. Laura and Alan meet up with Flynn, where of course Flynn and Laura are exes.
You still leave her clothes all over the floor?
Flynn.
No.
Alan!
Well, I mean, not that often.
With everyone else locked out of ENCOM, the trio decide to break into ENCOM at night.
Now that is a big door.
Flynn grabs a seat at a terminal which just happens to be right in front of the digitizing machine. Can you guess what happens next? A. Flynn scans his butt and sends a printout to Dillinger. B. Flynn scans his butt and sends a framed copy to Alan and Laura as an engagement gift. Or C. The MCP scans all of Flynn, butt and all, and sucks him into the computer. If you answered A or B, speak to me later. I can share some of my really hot Tron Yori Clue thruple fanfic. Flynn finds himself in an unfamiliar world where he's captured by the forces of the MCP and forced into competing against other captured programs in games such as Deadly Light Cycles, Deadly Frisbees, and Deadly High-Lie.
If I don't have a user, then who wrote me?
A big no-no in this universe, programs who believe that the users actually exist
will receive the standard, substandard training.
The MCP's ruthless henchman, Sark, oversees the games, and he's busting for a worthy challenger that can match his own high opinion of himself.
I've been hoping you'd send me somebody with a little bit of guts.
Flynn meets fellow program-turned-gladiator Ram, and they're both put in the light cycle game with Tron, who's currently the top fighter in the system. But coincidentally, Tron is also Alan's security program.
So long, sucker!
After breaching the bounds of the game, Flynn, Tron and Ram escape, pursued by the system's tanks and recognizers, though Ram will succumb to his injuries. Flynn commandeers a damaged recognizer with a little help from a bit. Tron needs to communicate with his user, Alan, and he grabs his girlfriend Yori, who is of course Laura's program. They visit Dumont, whose job it is to guard access to and from the system. Alan gives Tron the advice that he needs to defeat the MCP, which turns out just hit the MCP in the neck. The MCP has closed down the system and it's everybody's dream for everything to be open. Though this was a film in the days before scammers, hackers, computer viruses, subscriptions and general enshittification.
I'm fine. No problem.
Tron, Flynn and Yori commandeer a solar sailor and head to the MCP, where Tron has to, well, throw the frisbee at the MCP's neck.
You're a user?
I took a wrong turn somewhere.
But first he's got to deal with Sark. And then Mega Sark. Flynn throws himself into the MCP beam to distract it, and then Tron proves why he's such a pain in the neck to the MCP, which frees the system from the MCP. Flynn is returned to his physical self, where a printout says he invented Space Paranoids. That seems like totally incontrovertible evidence that will completely hold up in court. Anyway, MCP is offline, and then we cut to Flynn arriving at ENCOM in the company helicopter as the new boss.
That's Tron. He fights for the users.
Tron. Tron was and still is a visually dazzling film, like sticking your head inside of a gaming PC. And it's also got a fun story with characters that are just interesting enough to not come off as cardboard cutouts. And it has a cast who can make this sort of thing come alive. Honestly, had this script been filmed with lesser actors, we would not be talking about how cool Tron was.
What's Tron?
Tron has a lot of action that never feels constrained by the technical limitations that could otherwise make the film feel a little static. So, I like Tron, and I'm guessing most of you like Tron.
You are making me talk!
It started with Steven Lisberger. He'd set up a small animation studio with various partners in Boston, where the company made a living creating animated commercials. In the late 70s, backlit animation was becoming a popular way to create glowing effects for logos where, and this is a gross oversimplification, you filmed the glowing parts of the animation separately and then laid that over whatever backdrop you liked. Lisberger and company had a contract to produce 2 animated specials for NBC, but after that project, the idea was for the company to do a full-length animated feature with a character that they'd been experimenting with, a warrior made out of light, who they called Tron. By the early 80s, the company had moved out to California where they could find more animators, but to make a full-scale Tron film, they would need studio backing. At the time, none were showing much interest apart from Disney, who for many filmmakers were often the last resort.
It all looks so easy.
Since at the time, the studio usually made smaller films that were G-rated, and they weren't known for producing big-budget epics. But the important thing was, they were interested in Tron. While they hadn't produced much animation recently, their history was such that they weren't completely scared off by a film that would have so much animation. Now, this story isn't just as simple as a studio throwing a couple of mil at a first-time director looking to use time-consuming techniques.
Gotta see the guy in charge.
But they did have questions like how you could actually make this movie. Could Lisberger and company actually make the film that they had pitched? And could it be ready by, summer 1982?
You shouldn't be able to do that.
The way Tron was pitched, the film would push the envelope of special effects that faked the look of a computer. There was the planned use of large amounts of backlit animation, but also a limited amount of actual computer graphics. A short test was filmed, with actors in whatever costumes they could find, being shot against a white backdrop, and then the animators would move in. It was instructive for the producers and Lisberger as to how they were going to go about making the final film. And it got the film greenlit. Filming Tron would not just be pointing a camera at an actor in a funny suit and then drawing over the top of them. It would be far more complicated, with more steps than the Chrysler Building's fire escape. Cameras loaded with black and white film would shoot actors wearing white costumes with dark details against black sets. Each frame was then enlarged and printed as a separate piece of artwork with sections masked off into different layers. The background, the face, the costumes, and then the glowing parts of the image would be masked off by teams of rotoscope artists and photographed over a light source, and then all of these layers were composited together and re-photographed frame by frame. A simple shot of one character would involve 5 to 6 layers, though you can often see signs of just how painstakingly manual the process was. Glitches were inevitable, as were registration errors, where things just move around slightly, but it all adds to the film's charm. Just a note, charming glitches only applies to Tron, and if you attempt to use that excuse at your next annual review, you probably won't get a raise, though your mileage may vary.
Baby doesn't handle so good in town.
There were also actual computer graphics used for the sequences such as the light cycles, the solar sailor, the recognizers. Some backdrops were created with computers, but a lot was traditional 2D art. And as it was 1982, that meant airbrushing. Lots and lots of airbrushing. The production designs were a combined effort of several designers, particularly futurist Sid Mead and artist Mobius, where Tron looked completely unlike anything else seen in a movie up to that point. The mix of organic surfaces and hard-edged lines meant that Tron did not look like reality, unless of course you lived in a gaming PC, but it wasn't meant to look like reality. However, it also didn't really look like video games of 1982, most of which were blockier than a Lego factory.
Nice.
But for all the visual trickery, Tron is a story about people, and the little computer programs who look like they're users. The bulk of Tron's runtime is taken up with the story of a man who was swallowed up by a computer. Now this is a situation that I can totally sympathize with, except for me, it was the other way around. I mean, I tripped while taking a selfie and swallowed my phone. I will not go into the details of how we retrieved the phone. Suffice it to say, it involved 3 large bags of rice.
How did you do that?
Tron takes place in two worlds: the real world, albeit one with a video arcade that doesn't smell of urine and stale weed, and the world of the system. Part of the conceit is that most of the cast will play both a real world user and a computerized counterpart. Jeff Bridges as Kevin Flynn is the boy genius who's not a corporate slave, though his main goal is to find the evidence that proves that Dillinger passed off space paranoids as his own work.
Because, man, somewhere in one of these memories is the evidence.
Flynn is the cool guy to Alan's button-down engineer.
Fine, but my user told me to go take that sucker out.
Flynn, as the slightly chaotic one, had a teeny tiny bit of stubble, but the digitizing process seems to have had a depilatory effect, though we're never quite sure how far down that extends. Flynn's program Clue would appear briefly at the start of the film where he's de-resed, but at some point after this film he will be re-resed.
Greetings, program!
Bridges had already had one Best Actor Academy Award nomination and would have a varied career mixing large and small films. But at no point does anyone in this film ever complain that Flynn built the MCP in a cave.
Who are all these weirdos?
Bruce Boxleitner had read the script while making a Western and didn't know what the hell was going on. There was no way he was going to be able to handle this sort of weirdo science fiction technobabble balderdash. No way, no siree, he was never going to get this sort of thing out.
Well, it's called Tron.
Boxleitner played Alan in the real world and the security program Tron in the computer realm, where Boxleitner had to play two completely different stuffed shirt hero types in the one film.
The guy knows what you're up to.
Cindy Morgan continues the 2-for-1 as both Laura and Yori. Tron was one of her earliest film appearances, and she'd go on to do lots of guest shots in 80s television. Later in 1982, Boxleitner and Morgan would again co-star together in the short-lived adventure series Bring 'Em Back Alive.
What kind of program is he?
He's not any kind of program, Sark. He's a user.
By this time, David Warner seemed to have made a healthy career appearing as villains in 80s and later 90s films and television, where he managed to make them all sound different and not sound like they should end each episode with, "and I would have gotten away with it if it wasn't for those darned kids." However, in Tron, Dillinger would have gotten away with it if it wasn't for those darned kids. Warner plays Dillinger as a Brit and Sark as a hotshot American, though he also voices the MCP as if he were a teenager recounting the highlights of WrestleMania for the school newspaper.
You're getting brutal, Sark. Brutal and needlessly sadistic.
Thank you, Master Control.
Barnard Hughes was both Gills and Dumont, the latter named after the defunct American television network, just as Dumont was deemed obsolete inside the MCP system.
Old enough to remember the MCP when it was just a chess program.
Also in the film are Dan Shaw and Boxleitner's future Babylon 5 co-star, Peter Jurasik. Tron is an early movie to use the computer for more than just looking up information or analysing something. And it's also one of the very first movies to make video games a major part of the story. One of the most successful elements of Tron was the soundtrack by Wendy Carlos. It's a mix of synthesizers and live orchestral players, a mix that totally suits a film set both in the real world with non-dank arcades and the inside of a computer that's not a gaming computer.
It's nice.
And it is one of the better 80s fantasy scores from somebody whose name did not rhyme with Ron Silliams. 80s rock legends Journey lent the film 2 songs, but they haven't gotten around to asking for them back.
Maybe I should keep you around just to make me laugh.
Tron has the nostalgic haze of time and familiarity, where that does tend to obscure the areas where it's not perfect. The story is very simplistic, yet it's not always 100% readable the first time you see the film. Flynn is pretty much the only character with much of any personality or identity of his own, while most of the other characters lean heavily into character archetypes: the villain, the girl, the hero, the melody pop.
That was uncalled for.
Tron's final budget was around $17 million when it was released in July of 1982. It did okay at the box office. Decent, but okay. And while it had been Disney's most successful release in several years, and its merchandise had done good business, it was considered not enough of an almost hit and was too close to an almost flop. So it's almost as if the accountants flipped a coin and it landed on flop so that they could take the write-down. Tron's reviews at the time were mixed, where some people got it and others didn't. It was released in a year with a lot of strong genre fare: E.T., Wrath of Khan, Conan the Barbarian, Blade Runner, etc. However, Tron would join the ranks of films that weren't a massive hit at the box office,
End of line.
but would later become a cult classic on home video and television. Like Blade Runner, Tron's cult would start off small, like those people who worship the space god Ganbanadax, but would later become a much larger phenomenon. Like all of the people who think Ganbanidax is their blood pressure medication. Ask your physician about Ganbanidax today. Side effects include dizziness, mood swings, drowsiness, sleeplessness, lethargy, headaches, aneurysms, embolisms, and sudden and irreversible death.
Oh, I don't remember too much.
After Tron more or less didn't set off waves of films using similar techniques, Tron's producer Donald Kushner met with television producer Glenn A. Larson about a TV series that would use some of the same techniques pioneered on Tron, and the result was the short-lived 1983 series Automan, which used a simplified but still complicated process for making the title character appear as if he was generated by a computer. Steven Lisberger would direct 2 more features, though neither's had anything like the sort of belated cultural impact that Tron has had.
I have been doing a little hacking here, as a matter of fact.
I saw Tron at the cinema, but unusually for me at that age, I ended up seeing it theatrically twice, which was something I'd only done previously for Star Wars films. I have always liked Tron for the film itself and its dazzling visuals, as well as the story of how it was made. I'm obviously not the only one, since there was a pent-up demand for more Tron-based media. Video games were an obvious place to see more of the world of Tron, and it seems as though every animated series has riffed on Tron at some point, all of which added to the idea that there was an audience ready for another Tron film. Behind the scenes, work quietly began on a new film.
I had Tron almost ready.
Like the first movie, a test trailer was put together, but this one was shown to fans at Comic-Con in 2008, partly as a way to get people excited for a potential new film, but also as a way to measure just how excited they would be.
I've cracked it, he kept saying.
And then in 2010, Joseph Kosinski's Tron Legacy was released, and like its forebear, did decent numbers at the box office, but not quite decent enough to offset its large budget.
What am I supposed to do?
Survive.
Tron Legacy was released in 2010 and incorporated nearly 3 decades of computer advances in revisiting the system of Tron from a fresh perspective. Also, inside the computer now actually looks like the inside of my computer.
I understand that now.
Flynn had gone missing in the 80s, and years later, the contemporary version of Encom is about to release its latest paid operating system. Until, of course, Flynn's son Sam breaks into Encom and releases it for free. He follows some clues to a secret chamber in his father's arcade, where, guess what? He gets sucked into the computer, where he's put to work fighting in games, where he learns that the ruler of this corrupted system appears to be his long-missing father, who looks like he's on the character select screen of a PS2 game. It turns out not to be Flynn Sr., but his computer avatar, Clue. The real Flynn Sr. is there, looking more like Jeff Bridges in 2010 rather than a PlayStation 2 Flynn. Before he disappeared, real Kevin Flynn had been dividing his time between the real world and the computer system, but he got stuck there when Clue turned insurrectionist and engineered a coup. It was a Clue coup. Add in some new computer entities called ISOs that Clue's forces attempted to purge from the system, where we meet Flynn's assistant Cora, who's the sole surviving ISO.
Do you know Jules Verne?
Sure.
What's he like?
Basically, there's only one way out for Sam, this portal, and Clue and company wants to use the same portal for them to get out of the system.
What's your plan?
I'm a user. I'll improvise.
After various impressive-ish battles and confrontations, Sam takes Cora with him to the real world. Wow, computer characters in the real world. There's probably a sequel starring an incredibly dodgy actor in that idea, but it'll never happen.
Just when I thought it couldn't get any more profound.
Garret Hedlund is the generic action hero Sam, with Olivia Wilde as Cora, who does seem to be the least bored person in this entire film. Seriously, everybody just seems so weary in this. Jeff Bridges and Bruce Boxleitner returned as their respective characters, most of the time. There's also Cillian Murphy and Michael Sheen as a coked-up albino David Bowie caricature. We hope.
I presume, Your Excellency, they perished in the elevator.
There are many characters who will appear briefly, but if they aren't given a name, then the chances are they'll explode into a mess requiring a digital mop and bucket. The story is very familiar, but towards the end it does get a little messy, where Sam is trying to get his dad back to the real world while Flynn and Clue face off against each other. Tron at one point was said to have died, but apparently he's turned evil and he's known as Rinsler.
Cell phones, online dating, Wi-Fi.
What's Wi-Fi?
The aesthetic is much less artificial and shiny. This is a very matte world with a lot of black and contrasting white highlights, and lots of glowy stuff, but this one is done without the static backlit animation.
What is this?
Computer-generated effects had come a long way in 28 years, but even so, watching Tron Legacy can feel a bit like whiplash if you expected a sequel from 2010 to look exactly like a 1982 movie. The first Tron came out when video games were mainly blocky 2D pixel games, or glowing vector graphics if you wanted to be ambitious and do 3D. Tron Legacy echoed the change in video game aesthetics, where games, or at least the big AAA games, looked to ape the style of movies. But for a movie that was so digital, Tron Legacy's computer worlds often built sets for some rooms and chambers, albeit with a lot of blue screen and CG help. As part of the use of practical effects, the glowing suits were captured in camera as the costumes had the lighting built into them. To me, that's probably the coolest thing in the film. I did once have to wear a suit to work that had its own built-in lighting, but let's just say that really did freak out people whenever I was walking home and cut through the graveyard on a foggy evening.
It was impressive, really.
Of course, for all of the effects that worked very well, the film is notorious for an important effect that does not work as well. Almost any scene of the digitally de-aged younger version of Flynn or of Clue, where it stands out like a Roadrunner at a Coyote convention, or indeed a Coyote at a Roadrunner convention.
The cycles haven't been kind, have they?
There are still light cycles and recognizers, but things had moved on from simple polygons. The music from Daft Punk mimics the aesthetic of the film quite well. It's not grand and orchestral like Wendy Carlos' score, but it does suit the more action-oriented nature of the story. Legacy's soundtrack has become one of the most popular aspects of the film.
The game has changed, son of Flynn!
Tron Legacy as a film mostly works. Tron Legacy as a sequel to Tron, again, mostly works. Any fan of Steven Lisberger's 1982 film is most likely going to prefer that, while those whose entry into the world of Tron was Tron Legacy will probably prefer Legacy. I don't mind Legacy at all, where I would rate it as alright. Now when I say alright, I mean alright as in, yeah, it's pretty good. Not alright as in, well, I fell off a bar stool and hit my head on the counter and somebody said, "Are you okay?" And then I replied as I woozily rose to my feet with blood pouring out of an open wound on my forehead, "Yeah, I'm alright." Tron Legacy is, yeah, it's alright. That does sort of imply that Tron Legacy isn't a great film. It is, however, a really cool film. Both Tron and Tron Legacy pull off the trick of, if you like it, you really like it. And if you're not on either film's wavelength, then either is just okay. Anyway, it's enough of that. Time to change the bandages.
Together we're gonna change the world, man.
It's like so much that we cover. You often prefer something the way it was when you first experienced it. But again, Tron Legacy didn't make quite enough money at the box office for work on a sequel to continue.
It's over!
But hang on, people just love Tron. They really love Tron.
But we're not here to relive the past. Let's see about your future, shall we?
And so, in 2025, the studio ignored the sunk cost fallacy, or in this case, the sark cost fallacy, and went ahead and made a third film, Tron Ares. This video was posted before Ares was released, so obviously we haven't seen it. But if you're watching this video after 2025, there's a strong chance that we still won't have seen it.
Game over.
Fans of either film are nothing if not devoted. One fan of the original made his own Tron suit and became known as the Tron Guy. Now that's pretty cool, and if I'm honest, I'm slightly jealous since the only nickname that ever stuck with me was Porcini Mushroom Soup Guy. I mean, you order soup twice and you're marked for life.
I was afraid you were gonna say that.
The original Tron was made in an analog world, taking tentative steps into the digital one.
Are we there yet, Mommy?
With some familiar and not so familiar computing terms and analogies. While Tron Legacy is an all-digital production, apart from of course the people and the partial sets. Each was a Tron movie for a different generation, though there are folks who appreciate both takes on the material. If I had to pick a personal preference, for me obviously it's Tron from 1982.
Now, how are you going to run the universe if you can't even answer a few unsolvable problems?
Tron was a computer fantasy unlike anything else at the time, and for a long time after. A film that wasn't necessarily about characters, but somebody made the mistake of making them interesting and hiring excellent actors that weren't completely overshadowed by the dazzling special effects.
That's right.
If you enjoyed this review, please like and subscribe, leave a comment below, or check out some of our other videos.
Tron.